Today I want to introduce you to the way that I've been thinking about pacing in storytelling recently, because I think that a lot of writers would benefit from breaking down the way that we usually think about pacing into a few different categories. A lot of us tend to think about pacing as a singular monolithic component of a manuscript, something that's very hard to kind of describe, but that essentially refers to what the reader's perception of the rate at which stuff happens in a manuscript is. It's so subjective when we think of it as a reader's perception rather than about the components that are technically present in the writing of a manuscript. So let's break this down. I have 4 categories of pacing that I want to introduce today, but maybe you'll think of some more. This is not necessarily comprehensive. The first category is narrative pacing. I think this is the most similar to how we typically conceptualize pacing as writers. It's how quickly it feels like the overall story is taking shape. And so that can break into categories such as the introduction of a character's personality, for like the point of view character or the main character, the introduction of relevant side characters, the introduction of the conflict of the story, how quickly we get a sense of various characters' motivations and what the obstacles will be in achieving goals. This form of pacing is probably the most helped by something like a beat sheet or storytelling structures. I think when people feel like there's something not quite right in the narrative pacing of their work, they'll turn to craft books that really give you something like a formula that you can test your work against to see if there's anything missing or if anything in your story would resonate with readers more if you were to place it earlier in the story. The second kind of pacing that I've been thinking about is actions per page. I think that the go, go, go feeling of a manuscript is really determined by characters doing or experiencing things, especially by being proactive. So rather than stuff happening to them, this is the stuff the characters do to make the story progress, to investigate things around them, to get to know other characters and their situations, or to sow chaos. Really, so much you can do with that. And tied together with that is events per page. So that is the stuff happening to the characters, the external things that are surrounding them. It is the world acting on the characters rather than the characters acting on the world. So this is the rate of incidence of characters being subjected to or reacting to external situations. And then the fourth category of pacing, in the way that I've begun to break them down, is philosophical or thematic pacing. It's a macro view of how quickly various characters develop their worldviews as they change in their perception of the theme throughout the story. Some character arcs are a slow burn, so some make gradual progress, and some flip sides all at once, like it might be building for a while and then they make a quick transition. So like an example is She-Ra and the Princesses of Power, the Netflix show. Adora abandons the Horde very early in the story. So in terms of like the philosophical or thematic pacing of the story, she's introduced to this like completely world-shattering new perception of the life she has always known, and she switches sides very quickly. But another character like Shadowheart in Baldur's Gate, you're playing that game for 100 hours often before you get really any movement in her perception of her deity and in her goals. So when we talk about these various kinds of pacing, there's not usually one particular way of doing it that's better for a story. It depends on what story you're trying to tell and how the pacing can support that particular internal journey for the characters. So these have been 4 ways to think about pacing besides just the reader's perception of it. I hope that it will create more of a technical tool set that you can implement in your writing. And let me know in the comments if you can think of any other axes of pacing that would be helpful for other writers to know about. Happy writing!